Sorry Now, Paul Turner Mystery, Book 1. Author, Mark Richard Zubro. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York, 1991. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 7. Fenwick and Turner ran into massive chaos in the lobby of the Chicago Hilton and Towers. The noted author and talk show guest, Arnold Bennett, held court in the grand foyer with a gaggle of media people around him. The camera light shone on his bald head as he gesticulated and roared. Arnold Bennett, arch-conservative and darling of the right wing, published one novel a year about international conspiracies and foreign intrigue. His books belong to the more macho-than-thou school, with lots of military hardware and international intrigue. His hero, the same now through 26 books, bedded a different woman in chapters 1, 6, and 15 of each adventure. Every book since number 8 had hit the New York Times bestseller list. Every book since number 17 had made it to number 1 on the list. Bennett cultivated his reputation as an eccentric. He could show up on a talk show dressed in anything from see-through pajamas to a canary yellow three-piece suit. He refused to travel on any days except Tuesdays and Thursdays. On the talk shows, he loved bantering with hosts and plugging his books. Many criticized him for selling out his profession, but since most of the comments came from authors who were far less successful, they were somewhat suspect. At the moment, in the lobby of the Hilton, he waved a piece of paper at the cameras. He was, Turner suspected, on the verge of hysteria. They couldn't reach him through the press reporters, so they listened. Bennett screeched, "This is all I have left. This is the only thing they left me." He flourished the paper around his head. A reporter asked, "Why don't you have a copy?" Bennett stared fixedly at the interlocutor. Turner could barely see either of them through the crush of people. Today, Bennett wore an entirely turquoise outfit. "Everyone knows," Bennett said, superiority dripping from each word, "that I never keep a copy. I never revise. I sit and write until I'm done. I see each instant of action in my mind, and it becomes reality when I put it on paper. Nothing gets between me and my readers. I've never made copies before, and I will not in the future." Turner stopped a hotel employee and asked if he could tell him where to find house security. She pointed to a tall woman at the edge of the mob. Behind Bennett, Turner and Fenwick eased around the crowd. Turner showed his star and introduced himself. She jerked her head backward and said, "Follow me." Away from the press of the crowd, she said, "That has to be the biggest jackass this side of anywhere." "What happened?" Turner asked. The security director, Mabel Henshaw, told them. "He called us about an hour ago. I think he called the media first. They got here awful goddamn quick. He claims 3 guys broke into his room. 2 of them held him down while the other burned his manuscript. I think it's all just a publicity stunt. Who ever heard of any author keeping 1 copy of their book?" Fenwick said, "I've read about this guy. Supposedly, it's true. He only keeps 1 copy. He takes it with him on his tours, sort of like a security blanket." "At any rate," Henshaw said, "I can't see it being important enough for you guys to be here." Turner explained briefly about trying to find connections between odd problems far right-wing people had been having lately. "Did these guys talk to him?" he asked, Henshaw said. "I haven't had 2 minutes alone with him to ask. He started going nuts when the first camera showed up, and he hasn't stopped. You guys can question him if you want." With Henshaw's assistance, they got Bennett away from the cameras. They returned to his hotel room to talk to him. "How did they get in here?" Turner asked. "I called room service." Bennett paced up and down the room throughout the conversation, frequently punctuating his statements with wild gestures. "They must have intercepted the call, or the guy with the cart. They came in, grabbed me, and threw me down on the bed." "How many were there?" Fenwick asked. 3. All wore dark sports coats. 1 was very tall and exceptionally thin. The others were medium height. They found my manuscript, held it in front of my face, and then burned it. One of them disconnected the smoke alarm before they started. They used the cover of the serving tray to put the ashes in. Did they say anything? Turner asked. Yeah, sorry now, aren't you? What the hell is that supposed to mean? How did they get away? They knocked me out with chloroform, and I used it in 3 or 4 of my books, and I know the smell. I was out just a few minutes. Who would do this kind of thing to you? Fenwick asked. How should I know? Does anyone have reason to dislike you? Have you gotten any threats lately? Turner asked. I always get nasty letters from bleeding heart liberals. Last year, I suggested we create a funeral pyre of all the legislators who oppose the flag-burning amendment to the Constitution. A couple of people have filed suits over the years claiming they slandered them in my books. Just because they see their pet liberal causes or politicians made fun of, they get all huffy, bleeding heart wimps can't take it. Any specific causes or groups lately? Turner asked. He thought a minute. Nope, nobody lately. Was that really your only copy of the next book? Turner said. Yes, I keep only one copy. What will you do? Fenwick asked. Find the bastards and torture them as they scream for mercy. Fenwick said. I meant about the book. I'll have to write it again. Goddamn thing. In the hallway, waiting for the elevator, Turner said, Same 3 guys? Gotta be, Fenwick said. He shook his head. I can't believe the liberals organized a terrorist group. Maybe the meek got tired of waiting, Turner replied. When the elevator reached the first floor, he said, Let's talk to room service. Down in the kitchen area, they found that everything about the order for Bennett had been very normal. He'd called down. They made the breakfast, and Felix took the order up to the room. He'd never come back and never delivered the food. The head of the kitchen whispered to them, Felix Milta is an illegal. I don't want trouble. We hire some of them to give them a break. Not because it's cheaper. We pay everybody the going wage. He has no green card. He probably saw trouble and ran. They obtained Felix's address from payroll and drove to 18th and Ashland. Felix answered the door of his 4th-floor walk-up apartment. He saw their stars and shoved the door in their faces. Fenwick caught it and threw it back at him. Felix staggered and then tried to run. Turner caught him halfway down a hallway. Felix struggled briefly, but Turner, younger and stronger, subdued him in less than a minute. Then they cuffed him and set him down on a kitchen chair. Felix spoke accented English. He was about 5'5", with cropped black hair. Turner guessed him to be in his late 40s. Felix refused to look at them when they asked questions. Finally, Turner said, Felix, we don't want to send you back to Mexico. We just want to find out why you didn't bring up that tray this morning. Why should I believe you? Felix asked. Turner said, Look at me. The man raised his brown eyes to look at Turner. I give you my word. You tell us what we want to know, and we leave. We forget we ever knew you. Felix gazed at Turner for over a minute, weighing his chances. Finally, he said, If I don't talk, we bust your ass, Fenwick said. Felix shrugged. I got a lousy deal, or I got to trust you. Some choice. Turner did something genuinely shocking. He caught Felix's eyes and said, Please? Felix Milta's jaw dropped in disbelief. Turner asked, Why didn't you bring up the tray? 3 guys stopped me in the hallway outside the room. They offered me money to let them take care of it. When I heard what happened later, I ran. What did they look like? Turner asked. Felix shut his eyes and thought, They looked like North Americans. White. Did you notice eye color, height, weight? Turner asked. He gave the same general description as Bennett had, and little more. They offered me a lot of money, and I didn't bother to notice anything else. How much did they offer? Fenwick said. Felix gazed about nervously. We aren't going to steal it from you, Turner said. Felix said, A lot of money. He looked at Turner's face. $500. Fenwick said, Not a bad day's pay. What else did they say? Turner asked. Nothing. And they told me there would be no trouble and I could keep the money, no matter what. With that much, I can help my family here and in Mexico. Did you see them later? Turner asked. No. I took the money and left. I wanted to hide it in case they changed their minds and tried to accuse me of stealing it. Turner unlocked the handcuffs. Feliz eyed them suspiciously. You are really going to let me go? You haven't done anything illegal that we need to handle. And be careful with the money, Turner said. They left. In the car, Fenwick said, I still can't believe you said please. Now we ask politely. I thought it might work with this guy, Turner said. And it did. We should have busted him or brought him in to look at mug shots, Fenwick said. Probably, and the money could have some bearing on the case, but my guess is it was all in small, unmarked bills. If we need it, we can come back and get it. Mug shots are useless. These guys are new on the block. What if Feliz skips? Turner eyed his partner. We could arrest him for... Now I'm willing to take a chance. I doubt we'd find the money. He's got it hidden. Besides, we promised the guy. I'd rather keep my word. Fenwick grunted agreement. We going to try to track Wilmer's movements? Turner nodded. He lived on Lake Street, a few blocks west of Racine. How do you know that? I've been there. A couple of whores rolled him one night. He looked worse than usual. It was after his weekly dousing with perfume. I saw him in the street and took him home. He lives in one of the abandoned buildings down there. Fenwick said, I should have listened to him. I should have listened to him. He must have known something. Or he got rolled by some bored kids who dumped him into the river for the hell of it. Let's go. Two buildings separated by a narrow gangway sat amid the debris of a torn-down block on the near west side. At 11 in the morning, they didn't have the sinister emptiness of midnight fears. L tracks stretched overhead. They banged on the door of the building further east. It's abandoned, Turner said. Fenwick kicked at the door. It fell in on the second blast. Dust motes scattered up as they climbed the stairs in front of them. Scrapes of wood paneling, remnants of what once lined the walls halfway to the top, remained in scattered strips. They heard no rustling of human occupation. No radios or TVs, no other debris of the electronic age intruded on their trudge up the stairs. Oppressive humidity and closeness surrounded them. Why do you have to live on the top floor? Fenwick said as they paused on the landing outside his door. Awful goddamn dark in here, he added. I should go back for the flashlight. Turner shrugged. He pushed at the door and it opened. A window smeared with filth to the point of opacity let in only enough light to prevent a trek down for the flashlight. The paint on the walls of the apartment matched the top half of the ones in the hall. Bare, encrusted with dirt and soot. Perhaps painted light yellow in a better time. The one room had no appliances and no bathroom. It stank of piss and shit, although neither were in blatant evidence. The mattress from a twin bed lay in one corner, a tattered blanket set in a heap in the middle of the bed. Next to it, they found two boxes. From the first one, Turner pulled out a plastic trophy that said, Wilmer had been the checkers champion of Crawfordsville, Indiana, when he was in 6th grade. Fenwick pulled out a bag that contained marbles, 3 Steelies, and 2 extra-large cat eyes, along with 14 assorted smaller ones. They sifted through the other materials, but turned up nothing of value to the investigation. In the second box, Turner found a collection of broken and ruined toy cars. Poor guy, Turner said. He explained to Fenwick about Wilmer's present for Jeff. They removed the cars, under which they found a variety of papers. The two men sat on the edge of the mattress. Fenwick moved the tattered blanket out of the way with the tips of 2 fingers. They each took a stack of papers and examined them carefully. I think this is a high school diploma from someplace in Indiana, Fenwick said. Maybe Crawfordsville? But I can't really make it out. He turned to the next one. These are medical notices. Turner glanced at them and he said, These are all from Mother Mary Hospital. We can start there. Most of this is just paperwork. We can take it with us. At the bottom of the papers, they found a faded black and white photo. A young child looked out at them in a sailor suit in front of what was probably a zoo cage. Fenwick said, I wonder if that's him or his kid. Turner peered at the picture. From the style of the clothes, I'd say it's him. They drove to Mother Mary Hospital, noted throughout the west side of the city for its charitable work. The vast complex stood near the corner of Ashland and North Avenues. Half of it looked ready to collapse into the nearby slums. The other half looked as if it would be the envy of most of the medical centers in the country. The nun in charge, Sister Constance, greeted them warmly. Turner explained to her about the autopsy report on Wilmer and showed her the papers they found in the apartment. He concluded, "We'd like to know who his doctor was, especially the names of any friends or even personal contacts among the hospital staff." She examined the papers for several minutes. "These do say he tested positive for HIV antibodies." She frowned and shuffled through them again. "There's no record here that he ever accepted AZT or any other treatment. Also that he never had any opportunistic infections." She turned to her computer and pressed keys rapidly for a minute, then looked at them. "What you have here is a fairly complete record," Turner asked. "Is it strange that he didn't accept treatment?" "It's a little odd, but some of our older patients refuse treatment. Some of them want to die or think they do. Often they turn to us when it's too late." "Did he have any family?" Turner asked. Sister Constance ran her fingers rapidly over the keyboard. "Nothing listed here." "Was he seeing any doctor in particular?" Turner asked. She worked the computer a few seconds, then said, "Dr. Schmiel or Dr. Manfred." "Is that George Manfred?" Turner asked. "Yes. Do you know him?" the nun asked. "We've met. He's one of our best doctors. Spends all his time with the people with AIDS. Does a wonderful job with them and their families. Works incredible hours." "Anyone else Wilmer talked to on a regular basis?" Turner asked. "You can try down in the emergency room. They get to know some of the regulars, and according to their records, your Wilmer was in and out. Drunks fall down and hurt themselves often. After finding out that Dr. Schmiel was on vacation and Dr. Manfred wouldn't be in, they interviewed the emergency room staff. A few vaguely remembered Wilmer, but none knew him well." As Turner and Fenwick got ready to leave, an older nurse in her 60s and moving slowly as if her feet hurt and there were a million miles to go before the end of her shift, introduced herself as May Worth and said she knew Wilmer. She beckoned for them to follow to a small staff lounge area. She got her coffee and plunked onto a gray couch, then said, "I knew him. Tough old coot. Never wanted anybody to touch him. Didn't like me because I made him clean up whenever he came in. I washed that old man's body more time than I care to admit." She sipped her coffee. Turner felt that if he ever needed to have a nurse, he wanted to have one exactly like May Worth. She continued, "I used to talk to him. Did you know he graduated from Harvard?" Turner said, "A lot of bums make claims. You're telling me, and you're saying I can't tell the difference? I've been doing this 40 years, since before either of you was born. I've seen poor people, rich people, frightened people, dying people, brave people. These old bones have seen a lot of death and dying and miracles too. I've seen people at their best and worst, and I'm here to tell you, when Wilmer talked to me, I learned the truth. He tried lies, they all do. I have my ways, I listen. Most people don't. You ever stop to listen to him?" "Not often enough," Turner said. "Too bad. You might have learned something." Turner cleared his throat. "Did he tell you anything about friends or relatives?" "I know he was married once. Don't know where or for how long. Come to Chicago in the early 50s. Couldn't get a job. Used to mumble that Joe McCarthy ruined him. Never had any visitors when he stayed overnight. You might talk to Dr. Manfred. He might have known him better. He's a good doctor. Has a good relationship with the patients. They trust him." "Did Wilmer make friends here at the hospital?" Turner asked. "A few. He liked to talk. He was most friendly with the most seriously ill PWAs. Many of the ones he used to talk to are dead. Nobody who's here now." In the hall, they used the phone at the nurse's station to call Manfred's answering service. "Why do you have his number?" Fenwick said. "He's the guy I met," Turner said. "Oh," Fenwick said, then added, "We'll have to check the other shifts here." Turner agreed. They'd have to come back. They waited 5 minutes for Manfred to return his page. While waiting, Fenwick oogled the female hospital personnel. Manfred greeted Turner effusively when he found out who it was. When he found out what it was, he suggested they meet at Family Care Hospital when Turner made his afternoon visit. "I've got a couple of kids I need to stop by and see," Manfred told him. Back at Area 10, they tackled the paperwork. At 5, Ian called. "I don't want to hear this, do I?" Turner asked. "I'm going with the biggest scoop of my career. No one else has put all these incidents together. Only a gay paper would monitor such things. We watch the conservatives here. Have to. So we know what the opposition is up to. The Reverend called another news conference to denounce just about everybody, especially gay people. If it is a gay conspiracy to destroy some right-wing assholes, I have mixed feelings about it. A story like that could be really bad press for the gay community. On the other hand, it would make a terrific story. At any rate, I intend to find out the truth, no matter who's responsible." "Be careful," Turner warned. He understood Ian being torn between loyalty to the community and his journalistic integrity. "The murder is difficult enough to solve without these right-wing people trying to blame the gay community for a crime, which I doubt gays committed. These other things you've told me about haven't helped. Murderers do not do pranks." "You got a better explanation?" "Several, all involving coincidences, which doesn't make a lot of sense either," he sighed. "I just want to solve the cases. You can have honor and glory forever." "I'd rather just do my job," Turner said. At 6, still mired in paperwork, Turner and Fenwick decided to call it quits. They drove separate cars up to the hospital. Fenwick would drive home right after the interview with Manfred. In Jeff's room, Brian perched on the empty second bed, chatting cheerfully on the phone. Several books lay on the bed covers, near Jeff's right side. Turner saw that one of them was Freddie and the Popinjay by Walter R. Brooks. A game of Monopoly rested on the tray that swung out to be used for eating. Houses and hotels covered numerous properties. Mrs. Tolucci sat in a chair reading Descartes' philosophical essays. George Manfred stood by Jeff's left side, talking animatedly with the boy. Jeff saw his dad first. "Hey, Dad! I finally beat Brian in Monopoly." Brian put his hand over the phone receiver and said, "He got lucky." Turner ruffled his younger son's hair and congratulated him on his victory. He heard Brian tell whoever was on the other end of the line that he had to go. Mrs. Tolucci smiled at Turner. Turner introduced Manfred and Fenwick. Turner checked on his son's progress with a nurse who entered in answer to his pressing the button. Jeff would be able to leave the hospital soon. After talking briefly with his sons and Mrs. Tolucci, Turner, Fenwick, and Manfred moved into the hallway. They asked him about Wilmer. "I heard he died," Manfred said. "I've been trying to find out from what. I couldn't learn anything. I didn't think it was AIDS. I heard he got drunk and fell off a bridge. Is that right?" "No," Turner said. He told him what they knew. "Who'd want to murder an old drunk?" "We aren't sure," Turner said. "We're trying to trace his movements that last Saturday, but we don't know who his buddies were." "I can't help you much. I know his favorite place to flop was the Mission of Eternal Peace." "Mucklerat's mission?" Fenwick said. Pardon me," Manfred said. Fenwick explained briefly. Manfred knew little about Wilmer's private life. "If you've talked to May Worth, you know as much as almost anybody in the hospital. That woman is worth more than an entire school of brain surgeons." Fenwick left to go home. Manfred said he had a few more kids to see, and maybe they'd have time to talk briefly when he got back. Turner re-entered his son's room. Brian and Jeff sat on the bed with the Monopoly board set up for a new game. They played intently, each determined to win. Mrs. Tolucci left her paperback on the seat of the chair. She motioned Turner back into the hall. She whispered, "You know that Dr. Manfred?" Turner nodded. "We've met a couple of times. I like him. He's not an Italian boy, but that's all right. He was good with Jeffy. But have you talked to Ben Vargas yet?" We always talk, Mrs. Tolucci." "You haven't asked him for a date yet?" "No, Mrs. Tolucci." Nice Italian boys are the kind to settle down with. This Manfred, though, That doesn't sound Italian, although he is a doctor, and like that. We haven't really even gone out on a date. Why was he explaining this to her, he thought. Then again, why not? She cared. Turner decided to stop by the Mission of Eternal Peace on his way home. An enormous renovated factory building housed the Mission on West Madison, 2 blocks east of Chicago Stadium, where the Bulls played their home games. Inside, Turner found secretaries at computer terminals, well-polished floors, and gleaming woodwork. The people he saw moved with purpose and efficiency. A well-scrubbed young man in a form-fitting, short-sleeved white shirt and black pants greeted him from behind a modern desk. Turner showed his star and asked to talk to whoever was in charge at the moment. Several days ago, he talked to a Mrs. Epstein. The young man brought Turner to her again. She smiled in greeting. He told her he wanted to find out information about Wilmer. I don't know our clients by name. You might find a few of the staff who know him. May I take you to them? He agreed as they left her office, another gleaming modern room. She asked if he wanted a tour for half an hour. Turner let her lead him around the entire complex. The old factory must have taken over half a city block, and not an inch of it had been cleaned and polished to a shine. Much of it had been rehabbed, and some was completely new. She showed him chapels, workrooms, dormitories for men and women, dining rooms, a library, custodians, closets, and storage rooms. Everything seemed neat and organized in the extreme. Turner began to appreciate the kind of scale the Reverend worked on. It would take millions in donations to subsidize such an operation. Even if every one of the workers was a volunteer, all of these appeared to be young and energetic. In their slouched stupors, the homeless gathered at various parts of the building seemed mostly overwhelmed at their surroundings. Who would have had the most contact with Wilmer? Turner asked. She led him to a large admitting room. Each person who comes in has to sign in here. They are assigned their task for their stay. We don't give anything away free. They have no money, but they can give us their strong arms and bodies to clean, sweep, whatever is needed. Another young man who could have been the twin to the receptionist stood up and shook Turner's hand. Mrs. Epstein said to him, Travis, help the detective in any way you can. If you can't, please see if any of the others have any information he needs. The youth nodded, smiled at Turner. Travis sat on the edge of the desk. Turner wondered if the boy's face ever began to crack from what seemed to be a permanent smile. Immediately upon thinking this, he berated himself. The kid probably worked hard in an environment that had to be foreign to him. He must have seen and heard enough to depress him for the rest of his life. Turner had grudging admiration for faith that could stand up to the beating it must take every day, even in this gleaming, well-financed faculty. How long have you worked here, Travis? Turner asked. About a year. I go to the U of I. During the day, I make a little money doing this. They have a tuition program here for their employees, for us kids in the faith. Have you been saved, Mr. Turner? Turner said. I need to ask about one of the homeless who used to use the shelter. Wilmer Pensakowski. He's been murdered. You know him? The boy looked genuinely shocked. What happened? He asked. Somebody bashed him on the head and threw him into the river, Turner said. Old Wilmer? What on earth for? He was the most harmless guy. He never got in any fights or anything. He never complained about the work we gave him to do. Travis shook his head. He was one of the great characters around here. Everybody knew him. He spent 1 or 2 nights a week. I don't think he needed the place to stay, but he came for the meals. A lot of the people here have places to sleep, but they don't have enough to get something to eat, and it's easier to stay here than trudge to some miserable flop. Plus, we have air conditioning. How was he a great character? Oh, he told the best stories. A lot of times our clients exaggerate or even fabricate entire lies, and it's all lies. But Wilmer, he told stories. People would gather around to listen to him, and somehow he got them to tell fewer lies about their lives. Lots of them trusted Wilmer. Anybody in particular? No, Travis said. Just most everybody. What time did he come in Friday? Well, around 11. A little late for him, but not all that unusual. Some of the shelters close early. We never do. Had he been around much lately? No, not the past few days. But I'm not always on duty. When was the last time you saw him? Friday night, I think. It was a fairly slow night. Many of them sleep outside in the summer. We have fewer people, so it's easier to notice. How did he seem that night? How do you mean? Did he act normal? The boy thought a minute. No, not really. I mean, he didn't tell stories when he came in. He always teased me, and he didn't that night. What would he tease you about? Travis blushed red. He stared at his feet. He tried to talk dirty to me. They teach us to ignore a lot of the stuff the clients say. A lot of them are disturbed in the head, and they say all kinds of crazy things. He looked up at Turner. I think, he whispered, Wilmer may have been a homosexual. He made comments about my pants and other stuff. I never said anything. We're not supposed to let that type in, but Wilmer was a good guy. I've never met a real homosexual. Turner resisted the impulse to say, Now you have. Travis continued. That night he didn't tease me. He just got his admittance pass and his work assignment. Did he have any friends? None of them really had friends. Anybody he talked to more than the others? Travis scratched his nearly brush-cut hair. Well, he used to talk with Ajax. They had work detail together that night. They had to scrub the front hall. Ajax hates to work, so we try to pair him up with somebody we can reasonably trust. Less supervision on our part. Ajax is his real name? We never question them. Many are ashamed of what they've become. We accept what they say. We really don't need more than that. Ajax here? I'm not sure. Sometimes he gets here early. He just got thrown out of his regular place. And they tend to feel real lost when they lose a familiar spot, even if it's just an old refrigerator carton behind an old building. Travis checked the sign-in list. Yep, he's here. He's assigned to trash detail. No one had seen Ajax for half an hour. They began a search. They found him curled up and snoring in one of the pews in the chapel. The man's white-streaked gray hair was down to his shoulders. He wore a stained and torn army jacket that might have been issued to him in World War II. Travis introduced them and left. Turner showed Ajax his star, but the half-awake man barely seemed to notice. Instead, he said, I don't talk to cops. Ajax's rusty tenor had a tendency to crack, like a teenage boy's. Turner sat in the pew with Ajax, keeping only a foot or so between them. Why not? Turner asked. Don't trust them. They never help. Always want to harass you and make fun. He spent some minutes letting Turner know his view of cops in particular, and then of the world in general. He eyed Turner suspiciously as he finished. How come you don't yell at me and tell me you're going to run me in if I don't talk? Because I won't do that. Ajax cackled loudly. The sound echoed off the stark white walls. Sorry, young man, he said when he got himself under control. I don't believe you. I'm here about Wilmer, Turner said quietly. Ajax got teary-eyed. I heard he died. He was the only one here who ever cared for anybody else. Always collected his damn toy cars. If any of us ever found any, we always had to give them to him. He had his damn collection. Said he needed it for a little crippled kid he knew. He didn't know any crippled kid, Turner said. He never met my son, but he knew about him. You got a crippled kid, Turner said. My son, Jeff, has a birth defect. Ajax rubbed the stubble on his chin with the back of his right hand. The lines of old scars covered the front of the palm. Turner noted the encrusted dirt blackening the edges of all of Ajax's fingernails. The old man leaned close. Turner didn't flinch from the odor and the blast of noxious breath as Ajax said, You're Turner. Travis introduced us when we found you. Turner reminded him. I was asleep. You guys startled me. I didn't know you were that Turner. Wilmer always talked about you and your kid. He wanted a perfect collection of cars to give to the boy. He liked you, talked about you. Turner watched the old man carefully. How come you got a crippled little boy? Ajax asked. The one question Paul had asked himself 10,000 times after his son's birth. The one he'd never gotten an answer for. The question he taught himself not to ask. Now brought to the fore by this old man, the memory stung as if it were the night Jeff was born. Turner placed his elbows on his knees, his body faced forward, but his head turned sideways so he could look at the man next to him. "I don't know," Turner said slowly. "My wife died giving birth to him." Ajax placed his hand on Turner's shoulder. The cop didn't flinch. "I heard a lot of claims," the old man said. "I know which are true. I believe yours." He coughed and peered around the chapel. The brown pews, a simple metal lectern, and the parquet floor barely relieved the starkness of the 4 white surrounding walls. "I better tell you about Wilmer," Ajax said. Turner nodded. "He had AIDS. He couldn't tell anybody here. They wouldn't let him in. Wilmer hadn't been eating much lately. He'd lost a lot of weight." Turner gave an encouraging grunt. "Didn't bother me any. I'm not prejudiced about sick people or if they like guys." Turner almost smiled at the wreck of humanity next to him confessing his liberality. Something bothered him Friday night. Bothered him bad. Turner waited while the old man coughed and brushed away some spittle from the side of his mouth. "He wanted to talk to you. I'm surprised he didn't. Said he was going to." "He tried to," Turner said. He found himself describing the scene outside the police station, where Wilmer had gotten angry and left before telling what he knew. "Typical cops," Ajax said. "Although you don't seem to be a bad sort anyway. He had to talk to you. He claimed he knew something about that murdered girl. He wouldn't tell me what. I know he had a big deal meeting with someone Saturday. Don't know with whom. Wilmer said he'd give you one more try after the meeting." "Did he say with whom or where?" Ajax thought long and hard. "No. Sorry. If he mentioned it, I can't remember." "Could it have been on HIV positive support group or anything like that?" Turner asked. "No," Ajax said. "He didn't like groups. Always said he liked people, but put them in a group and they start making rules for each other. No group." After a few more minutes of questioning, Turner said, "If you think of anything, will you call me?" "I talked an awful lot for free tonight," Ajax said. Turner looked at the old man. "I appreciate what you've told me. I'll do what I can to pay you back for talking to me, but I can't promise you anything." Ajax laughed. "At least you're honest, young fella. Most everybody else would have promised me a bottle at least. I like you, I think." A light rain fell while Turner drove from the mission home. He wished it would rain hard enough to cool the weather off. As Turner pulled onto Taylor Street from Racine, he saw 3 blue and white police cars, double parked near the lemonade stand. These added to the confusion of the crowded street. He looked to see what the problem was. He saw people sitting on the stoops, gathered at the corners, a few lounging on top of mailboxes, the normal activity of a miserably hot summer night. He didn't see any of the cops. He pulled into a street. His house blazed with light. A beat cop gestured at him angrily. Turner didn't recognize the guy, who now started to yell at him to get his fucking car out of the way. Fire trucks pulled up behind him silently as Turner leaped from his car. He shoved his star at the screamer and began to race toward his house. Halfway down the street, the voice of Mrs. Tolucci, mixed with a few he began to recognize from the local district, stopped him. He hurried toward a knot of police huddled in the shadows in front of Mrs. Tolucci's house. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.